Language certainly changes depending on where you are. Language also changes within the individual, right?
Mm,
We we are different people with our language depending on who we are, where we are, what clothes we're wearing, the topic we're talking about, the person or persons we're talking to. Um, so many is so there are so many factors which can influence the way you speak. In what way is the idea of that person speaks in that way outdated?
well, I suppose actually this is a bit awkward for linguists because a lot of theoretical descriptive linguistics is built on the idea that each individual does have a sort of their own sort of unique and to some extent fixed
Mm,
way of speaking, and that the sort of the goal um, of a linguistic theory is to be able to describe
mm,
that um, that system, and it's only relatively recently that that sort of more theoretical tradition has sort of really um, started to come to terms with what sociolinguists, people who study that sort of thing, how people speak. Different people speak differently, and the same people speak differently depending on
mm,
what situation they're in.
mm.
It's only fairly recently that that idea has sort of been confronted um, uh, by sort of more theoretical linguists, because it makes the whole task a lot more difficult.
Mm.
If you're saying, because then the question arises, like, if people can speak in these different ways, then like, what do we make of that when we're trying to describe it? Do we say that there is, multiple completely separate sort of languages going on
Mm.
within this person, or do we say that there's some sort of things that are some sort of patterns that are fixed, and then others that are sort of subject to variation, but there's a sort of core that
Mm.
of how the person speaks that's the same
Mm.
in whatever situation they are? And is the answer to that question whether to go with the sort of the multiple separate systems, or the sort of single system with
Yeah.
like variations on the theme? Is the answer to that question even the same for all people? Like, so it sort of raises a whole load of sort of questions which make the task of the linguist a whole lot more complicated when it was already complicated enough,
Mm. Definitely. Definitely.
given sort of how complicated, how complex
Mm.
language, even a sort of single, fairly well-defined variety is.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's one of the things that amazed me the most is that, and this is documented. People can talk to the same people about the same topic in the same place, but if they're wearing different clothes, the way they will
mm,
speak is different. I mean, those. I mean, it really does give you an idea of how sensitive a language is to
mm,
where it's being spoken. I mean, the way you would talk about, let's say, a football match, and these phonetic features or whatever it might be, certain aspects of language, grammar, for example, using or not using ain't, depending
mm,
on who you're speaking to, depending on right now I just ended on a preposition, yeah, to whom I am speaking, right? I mean,
yeah,
maybe if I'd been in a tutorial at university or something, I might have avoided that.
yeah,
Talking to you, I didn't really think anything of it, even though we're talking about linguistics, and when I was at university I was talking about linguistics,
yeah,
and probably was wearing some similar clothes to this, to what I'm wearing now. So I think languages, I think it's an important question to answer. How different do linguistic varieties have to be before you say, okay, guys, this is ridiculous? These are clearly two different languages now.
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? So yeah, so now there's this quote. I can never remember where the quote is meant to be from, but that says, right, that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy.
Wainwright, I think. Wenrich. I can't pronounce his name.
Oh yeah, Weinreich.
Weiner. I can't. Yeah, I pronounce his name according to the.
I think he's German.
Max.
Was
Yeah.
German. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so on one level, that's the best definition you're going to get, because, well, going back to what you're saying about Mexican and Guatemalan Spanish, what makes those like sort of entities of Mexican Spanish and Guatemalan Spanish real is not anything about the sort of the language varieties themselves. It's a question of identity based on a political political
And
system.